Fortem 107 a Duche General Story em 1887 Wyoming Territor, Samuel Urai. Por Chaz Eduat Apir de Tobé no Fimor de a Crude Hand Draw Map on Yaloved Parchentente. The elderly shopkeepers trembling hands had hesitated before accepting the coin. His viatered face bearing a expression that Samuel would later recall as pure terror. What the ambitious young prospector could have known was that this seeming vortex piece of paper would lead him into the heart of the most feared legend. In the entire Wyoming Territory, a mystery so dark that even the tallest ranchers would abandon their homesteads rather than face what emerged from the shadows after sunset. Samuel Urai had arrived in Cheyenne 3 weeks earlier aboard a crowded railroad car filled with dreamers, gamblers, and fortune seekers. Unlike the others who flocked to the salons and brothels, Samuel possessed a methodical mind and an engineer's eye for detail. He had studied geology at Harvard before family circumstances forced him west, and he carried with him surveying equipment and a determination to strike it hit through careful observation rather than blind luck. The map caught his attention not because of any promised treasure, but because of the peculiar geological notations scrawled in faded ink along its margins. The parchment depicted a remote valley nestled between two distinctive rock formations about 40 miles northeast of Cheyenne. What intrigued Samuel were the symbols marking various locations throughout the valley, symbols that resembled no standard surveying marks he had encountered in his education. Even more curious were the handwritten warnings scattered across the document in what appeared to be different handwriting, different ink. As if multiple people had contributed to this strange cartographic puzzle over many years. Samuel spent days gathering supplies and questioning locals about the region depicted on the map. The responses he received were unsettling and contradictory. Some claimed the valley didn't exist, dismissing his inquiries with nervous languor. Others would grow silent and change the subject entirely. One grizzled buffalo hunter named Jake Morrison pulled Samuel aside in the Longhorn salon and spoke in hushed tones about the cursed ground where cattle would to graze and horses would to drink. Despite these warnings, or perhaps because of them, Samuel's curiosity only intensified. On a crisp October morning, he loaded his pack mule with enough provisions for 2 weeks and set out toward the coordinates indicated on his mysterious map. The journey took him through rolling prairie land that gradually gave way to more rugged terrain. By the second day, he noticed an odd phenomenon, the complete absence of wildlife. No bar de sangue from the scattered cottonwoods, no prairie dogs emerged from their burrows, and even insects seemed scarce. As Samuel crested a particularly surprised on the afternoon of his third day. The valley revealed itself exactly as depicted on the map to massive sandstone pillars flanked a narrow entrance. Their surfaces carved by wind and time into shapes that resembled twisted human figures. The valley floor stretched for several miles, covered in unusually loose grass that seemed almost emerald green compared to the brown prairie he had traversed. A clear stream meandered through the center, reflecting the afternoon sun like a silver ribbon. What immediately struck Samuel as wrong was the silence. Even in the most remote wilderness, there were always sounds, wind through grass, insects buzzing, the distant call of a hawk. Here, the silence was so complete it felt almost solid, pressing against his eardrums with oppressive weight. His mule, usually steady and reliable, began showing sounds of extreme agitation. Ears pinned back and nostrils flaring as if detecting some scent Samuel could te perceive. Following the map's markings, Samuel made camp near a cluster of large boulders about halfway into the valley. As he unpacked his equipment, he noticed something that made him pause. Scattered among the rocks were what appeared to be the remnants of previous camps, rusted metal fragments rotted leather, bleached bones that could have belonged to horses or cattle. More disturbing were the scratches carved into the boulder faces, desperate claw marks that seemed to speak of some final, terrified struggle. The first night passed without incident, though Samuel found himself unable to achieve deep sleep. Every small sound, the settling of his campfire coals, the slight breeze rustling his canvas, seemed amplified in the unnatural que revoke frequently, convinced he had heard something moving in the darkness beyond his fire. S glow but it team reinvestigated, flashlight in hand, refound nothing but empty grasslands stretching into shadow. The second day broke Samuel's first significant discovery. Following the map's notations, he came to the eastern wall of the valley where a series of symbols indicated something of importance. There partially concealed by a rockfall that appeared relatively recent, he found the entrance to a cave system. The opening was large enough for a man to enter upright, and cool air flowed from within, carrying a strange, sweet odor that reminded Samuel of flowers left too long in water. Inside the cave, Samuel's lantern revealed walls covered in pictographs unlike any Native American artwork he had studied. These images depicted scenes of horror and worship, human figures bowing before massive, tentacled shapes that seemed to writhe even in the static cave paintings. Deeper into the cave system, Samuel discovered evidence of more recent human presence, modern tools abandoned in apparent ash, torn clothing, and most disturbing of all, scratch marks on the cave walls that matched those he had seen on the surface boulders. As Samuel explored deeper into the cave network, his compass began behaving erratically, spinning wildly before settling on directions that made no sense given his understanding of the cave's layout. The temperature fluctuated unpredictable, dropping to nearly freezing in some chambers while others felt uncomfortably warm. In the deepest chamber he could safely access, Samuel made a discovery that would own him for the rest of his life. The chamber contained what appeared to be an altar of sorts, a natural rock formation that had been carved and shaped by human hands into a rugged circular platform. Surrounding this altar were dozens of skeletons, both human and animal, arranged in concentric circles as if they had died while participating in some ritual. What made the scene even more disturbing was the apparent age of the remains. Some skeletons showed clear signs of great antiquity, bleached white by time, while others still retained fragments of clothing that could have been more than a few years old. Samuel's hands show as researched the chamber layout in his journal, documenting every detail with the torogenes that had served him well in his geological studies. It was then that he noticed the altar vast entirely natural stone. Embedded in its surface was what appeared to be meteoritic material, a dark, almost black substance that seemed to absorb his lantern light rather than reflect it. As he leaned closer to examine this strange material, Samuel could swear he heard something, a low humming that seemed to emanate not from the rock itself but from somewhere deep beneath the valley floor. That night Samuel's sleep was filled with vivid, terrifying dreams. He saw the valley as it had been decades earlier, bustling with activity as settlers attempted to establish homesteads. He watched in horror as these pioneers discovered something in the caves, something that changed them, corrupted them, turned them against one another in orgies of violence and madness. In his dreams, Samuel witnessed the final night when the survivors, driven by desperation and terror, performed one last ritual at the altar, hoping to appease whatever force they had awakened. Samuel woke before dawn, drenched in sweat despite the cool morning air. His mule was gone. The animal had somehow freed itself from its tether and fled, leaving Samuel stranded in the valley with only what supplies he could carry. More disturbing than the mule's disappearance were the tracks surrounding his camp, footprints in the soft earth that appeared human but were wrong somehow, the proportions distorted, the spacing irregular, as if made by something that walked upright but had never quite mastered the art of human locomotion. With no choice but to continue on foot, Samuel decided to investigate the western portion of the valley where his map indicated another site of interest. They took most of the morning, and as he walked Samuel began to notice changes in the landscape itself. The grass, which had appeared so vibrant from the ridge, showed signs of some kind of bleed up close. Individual blades were spotted with dark patches that seemed to spread even as he watched. The stream, clear from a distance, revealed a troubling oil sheen when examined closely, and small fish floated belly, up in pools along its banks. The western site proved to be the ruins of what had once been a substantial settlement. Stone Foundations Market Were Buildings Had Sotod, and Samuel could trace the layout of what appeared to have been a small town. According to his maps notations, this settlement had been called Avonshurst. Though Samuel could find no record of such a place in any of the territorial documents he had studied before his journey. Among the ruins, Samuel discovered a partially collapsed building that had served as the town's church. Inside beneath a fallen timber and crumbled stone, he found a cache of documents that told the story of Avonshurst and explained why the valley had been abandoned. The papers, protected from the elements by a metal strongbox, included diary entries, official correspondence, and newspaper clippings that painted a picture of a community that had thrived briefly before succumbing to something beyond their understanding. The documents revealed that Avonshurst had been established in 1869 by a group of religious settlers led by a charismatic preacher named Ezekiel Morrison. The community had grown rapido, attracting families seeking fertile land and the promise of spiritual fulfillment faint. For 3 years, Avonshurst had prospered, its residents report exceptional harvests and a sense of profound peace and contentment in Tentwencon. The trouble began in 1872 when construction workers expanding the church basement broke through into the cave system Samuel had discovered. According to the diary entries, the caves were initially seen as a blessing, providing cool storage space and access to a reliable water source. However, within weeks of opening the underground chambers, strange incidents began occurring throughout the community. Livestock died mysteriously, their bodies found drained of blood but bearing no visible woods. Residents reported vivid nightmares and vague visions of impossible land-capes and creatures that defied description. The situation deteriorated rapidly as community members began exhibiting signs of what the town doctor described as collective hysteria and moral degradation. Previously devout families abandoned their faith, engaging in behaviors that scandalized their neighbors. Children disappeared only to return days later with no memory of where they had been, speaking in languages no one recognized. The preacher Ezekiel Morrison became obsessed with the cave paintings. Claiming they revealed divine truths that contradicted everything he had previously believed about God and salvation. The final entries in the diary described preparations for what Morrison called the Great Awakening, a ritual that would supposedly open a gateway to paradise. The entire community participated, gathering in the cave chamber around the meteoritic altar as Morrison performed ceremonies that combined Christian prayers with incantations copied from the cave walls. The last coherent entry, dated October 31, 1872. Expressed the writers growing certainty that they had made a terrible mistake but felt powerless to resist Morrison's influence. Samuel emerged from the ruined church as the sun began its descent over the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson that seemed so wrong in this cursed valley. Armed with the knowledge from the Avonshurst documents, he now understood that the map he had purchased was the treasure map at all but had a warning. Passed down through generations of those who knew the valley's terrible secret. The symbols he had initially mistaken for geological markers were actually warnings, attempts by previous visitors to mark dangerous areas and provide guidance for escape. As darkness approached, Samuel faced a crucial decision. He could attempt to leave the valley immediately, traveling by moonlight despite the dangers of navigating unfamiliar terrain in darkness. Alternatively, he could spend one more night in the valley, using his remaining daylight to gather more evidence of what had happened here. His scientific training argued for the latter course, but every instinct screamed for immediate departure. The decision was made for him when he discovered that the valley's entrance had changed. The narrow passage between the sandstone pillars, which had appeared perfectly normal during his arrival, now seemed so narrower. The rock faces closer together than he remembered. More disturbing, the ground beneath the passage was littered with bones, human and animal remains that definitely had not been there 3 days earlier. It was as if the valley itself was sealing itself, preventing his escape until some unknown condition was met with no choice but to remain until morning. Samuel returned to his camp city and began preparing for what he suspected might be his final night. Rebuilt his fire larger than usual, arranged his remaining supplies within his reach, and loaded his rifle with the few cartridges he had brought for hunt. Assevor que Samuel could not shake the feeling that he was being watched, though every time returned to scan the darkening landscape. He saw nothing but empty grassland and distant rock formations. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, and the valley plunged into a darkness so complete it seemed almost tangible. Samuel's fire, which should have provided a comforting circle of light and warmth, instead felt like a beacon advertising his presence to whatever forces prowled the darkness. The silence, oppressive during the day, became truly terrifying at night, broken only by sounds that might have been wind but carried undertones of something far more sinister. It was near midnight when Samuel first saw them. Shapes moving at the very edge of his fire, as illumination, forms that seemed almost human but wrong in ways his mind struggled to process. They moved with a peculiar shuffling gait, as if their joints beat in directions human anatomy showed to allow. Most disturbing was their number, what had initially appeared to be one or two figures multiplied as Samuel watched, until he counted at least 20 shapes circling his camp at a respectful distance. Samuel called out challenges, demanding to know who they were and what they wanted, but received no response except for what might have been louder, a sound like dry leaves rustling in wind. The shapes continued their slow circling, occasionally coming close enough for Samuel to catch glimpses of details that made his blood freeze. Faces that were human in overall structure but wrong in proportion, eyes that reflected his feelings like those of nocturnal animals. Hands that ended in claws rather than fingernails. As the night wore on, Samuel began to recognize some of the faces in the circle. They matched daguerreotypes he had seen in the Avens Hash documents, portraits of families who had vanished in 1872. These were the missing settlers, transformed by whatever force dwelt in the caves into something no longer entirely human. They had been trapped in the valley for 15 years, neither truly alive nor properly dead, sustained by the same power that had corrupted them. The realization brought a terrible understanding. The valley was indeed cursed, but not in the supernatural sense Samuel had initially imagined. Something had crash-landed here long ago, the source of the meteoritic material in the cave altar. This extraterrestrial presence exerted a subtle but persistent influence on organic matter, gradually transforming any life that remained in prolonged contact with it. The cave paintings weren't a primitive religious art but rather documentation left by the teens' first human victims, a warning disguised as worship. The creatures that had once been the residents of Avens Hash weren't malevolent in any human sense, they were simply following their transformed nature. Draw to living humans as sources of the life energy they needed to sustain their cursed existence. They had been calling to Samuel since his arrival, their influence growing stronger each night he remained in the valley. He could feel it now, a subtle pressure in his mind urging him to join them. To accept the transformation that would free him from human concerns like mortality and loneliness. Samuel fought against the alien influence with every tool at his disposal, focusing on memories of his life before the valley, reciting poetry and mathematical formulas, anything to maintain his human identity. He understood now why the entrance seemed blocked. It was a physical barrier but rather a psychological one. The valley's influence made the departure seem impossible, trapping victims in a web of despair and gradually eroding their will to escape. As dawn approached, Samuel made a desperate decision. Using his surveying equipment, he calculated the exact angle needed to reflect the morning sun's rays of his pocket mirror and direct them toward the meteoritic material in the cave altar. If his theory was correct, the alien substance was photosensitive, via by direct sunlight. This might explain why the transformed settlers only appeared at night and why the valley's influence seemed the strongest after dark. The plan required Samuel to return to the cave system while the transformed settlers still lurked in the darkness, a prospect that terrified him but seemed to offer his only hope of escape. Moving carefully and quietly, he made his way to the cave in trance as the sky began to lighten in the east. The creatures that had circled his camp seemed to sense his intentions, their movements becoming more agitated as they followed at a distance. Inside the cave system, Samuel worked frantically to position his mirror at the precise angle needed to reflect the rising sun's rays into the deepest chamber. The transformed settlers had followed him into the caves, their inhuman faces showing what might have been played in expressions as they realized what he intended to do. Samuel felt a moment of pity for these victims of alien influence, but his determination to escape overcame his compassion. The first rays of sunlight struck his mirror and reflected directly onto the meteoritic altar. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The dark substance began to smoke and crack, releasing a sound like screaming metal. The transformed settlers collapsed as if strings holding them upright had been cut, their bodies crumbling to dust that scattered in the cave's air currents. Throughout the valley, Samuel could hear similar sounds as other victims of the alien influence finally found release from their cursed existence. Samuel emerged from the caves to find the valley transformed once again. The oppressive silence was broken by the return of natural sounds, birds calling from previously empty trees, insects buzzing in the grass. The sickly green vegetation was already beginning to brown and return to normal prairie coloration. Most importantly, the passage between the sandstone pillars sold wide and clear, no longer blocked by psychological barriers or supernatural influence. As Samuel gathered his remaining supplies and prepared for the journey back to Cheyenne, he made a final decision about the mysterious map that had led him to this place. Rather than destroying it, as his first instinct suggested, he carefully folded the parchment and placed it in his journal. Someone had purchased this map before him and used it to discover the valley's secret. That person had somehow escaped and returned to civilization, adding their own warnings to those already inscribed on the ancient document. The map was a responsibility Samuel realized, a tool for ensuring that the valley's dangerous secret remained contained. Future generations might face similar threats, and they would need guidance from those who had encountered such horrors and survived. Samuel Urai had purchased the map for 10 cents and paid a price measured in terror and near madness, but he had also gained knowledge that might prove invaluable to others. Years later, Samuel Urai would establish himself as a successful mining engineer in Colorado, his geological expertise making him wealthy and respected throughout the territory. He never spoke publicly about his experience in the Cursed Valley, but he kept careful watch on newspaper reports and territorial surveys, alert for any sign that others had discovered similar sites. The map remained in his possession, stored in a locked drawer of his Denver office desk, waiting for the day when someone else would need its warnings. When Samuel Urai died in 1923 at the age of 78, his effects included detailed notes about alien influences on Earth and their potential dangers to human civilization. These documents, along with the original map, were donated to the Smithsonian Institution by his estate, where they remain today in the archives of the Department of Anthropology, filed under unverified historical claims, and available to researchers who know where to look. The valley in Wyoming territory still exists, though it appears on modern maps and is rarely visited by anyone who might recognize its significance. Satellite images show normal prairie land with no signs of the supernatural events that once occurred there. However, local ranchers still tell stories about that remote area, passed down through generations. Tales of strange lights in the sky indicate that refuse to graze in certain meadows where the grass grows to green, and the silence fails to complete. Samuel Urai, S-10 purchase had led him to a discovery that challenged everything he thought he knew about the world and humanity's place in it. The map that had seemed like such a bargain had actually been pre-sales. Not as a guide to treasure but as a warning about dangers that most people could ignore could even imagine. In the end, Samuel had found something far more valuable than gold or silver. He had found the truth about forces that shaped the world from shadows, and the knowledge needed to keep such forces contained. The story of Samuel Urai and his Tencent map serves as a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, some maps better left unfollowed. In the vast expanses of the American West, where civilization was still a thin over primordial wilderness, anything was possible, including encounters with powers that predated human existence and challenged human understanding. Samuel Urai had faced such powers and survived, but his experience served as a warning that not all who ventured into the unknown would be so fortunate.